Hi. I'm Renzo, I'm 22, and I'm studying economics because I want to fight the poverty in the world. I want to thank Marco Gualtieri for for Seeds and Chips. Thanks to him, I had the opportunity to listen live. John Kerry, Howard Schultz. I met a lot of young entrepreneurs, and I knew a lot of startups. I used to drink a lot of coffee. I drink a lot of coffee. And in my personal opinion, Italian coffee is one of the best in the world. Everybody loves Italian coffee, right? But 3 days ago, I figured out that Starbucks covers the tuition fees of the college and the life insurance of their dependents. So I decided only in September to start drinking only Starbucks coffee when they are going to open here. My grandmother, a lot of years ago when I was young, she used to tell me, Renzo, you're young and smart, so one day you have to change the world. I totally disagree with her, because 2 days ago, John Kerry told us that there are 8,000 children die every day for malnutrition and lack of food. And in the other part of the world, a lot of children, like 200 million children and teens, are overweight. So we can't wait. We must start to change the world, not tomorrow, not the next week, not the next year, not in the future. I think, in my opinion, today is the best time to start changing the world. Thank you.
Isn't Renzo great? He was nervous, and he did a really good job. Excellent job, Renzo. Yeah. Give him a round of applause. Good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Flowers, and I'm the Director of Global Food Security in Washington, D.C., at a nonprofit, bipartisan foreign policy institution with a very long name called the Center for Strategic and International Studies. In DC, it's just known as a think tank called CSIS. So I'm a policy nerd, I'm a world traveler, I'm a writer, I'm a speaker, and part of what I do is I follow global food security trends. I focus my work predominantly on US leadership and foreign aid in agriculture and nutrition. I travel around the world to better understand what kinds of development interventions work best. I convene thought leaders and decision makers to talk about policy solutions. And I write analytical publications that connect global food security to US strategic interest. So ultimately, the aim of my work and my team is to sustain American political will to reduce hunger, poverty, and malnutrition in the developing world. It's such an honor to be here, and I'm sure, like you, I've been inspired this week listening to young entrepreneurs, learning from food innovators, and connecting with leaders who are passionate about transforming the global food system. I'm going to be leaving Milan tomorrow with a new energy, with some new ideas. They're going to help my work, and I certainly hope the same is true for you. So for this session, there's a lineup of impressive speakers that are going to talk to you about sustainability as survival. When I think about sustainability and how it connects to food and hunger, I see it in 3 ways: sustainable natural resources, sustainable political leadership, and sustainable market systems. So let's start with natural resources. We can't talk about land, food, water, soil, plants without talking about climate change. Climate change has come up in almost many sessions here, almost every session. It was the primary focus of Secretary Kerry's remarks. So for decades, we've witnessed this onset of climate change and its often catastrophic impacts: droughts, floods, warming temperatures. Climate change-related events have serious implications for agriculture by reducing crop yields, increasing the presence of pests and diseases, reducing soil quality, and even decreasing the nutritional quality of staple crops. Meanwhile, a growing population, just like the video we saw at the beginning, means we need to increase agricultural production. So farmers, particularly smallholder farmers, are feeling the effects of climate change more than most. At the same time, those same farmers are being told they need to double production while conserving land and water. That's a really tall order. Natural resources are finite. At most, there's only 12% of arable land available worldwide that isn't currently forested or subject to erosion or desertification. And most of that land is in rural areas of South America or sub-Saharan Africa, where infrastructure is minimal or non-existent and soil quality is low. I'm sure you've heard, because of the water theme here, that agriculture already accounts for 70% of fresh water use. Add to that urbanization, which is quickly stretching water to its tipping point. Water is a precious resource, and it's a source of conflict between communities. As you saw when you come into this event, the first thing is that big map and graphic that shows the connections between water, food insecurity, and conflict. And if you walked over to the big future room other days during this event, you saw that photo exhibit of water grabbing that featured Ethiopia, a country dear to my heart. I lived in Ethiopia for 3 years. And I don't know if you know, but in Ethiopia, 85% of its population depends on agriculture for a living. Compare that to my home country of America, where you're looking at less than 1%. So smallholder farmers who live in environmentally susceptible areas, just like drought-prone areas of East Africa, are the most vulnerable. I've met farmers around the world, from Guatemala to Bangladesh to Ethiopia, and they almost always talk to me first about the unpredictability of the rainy season and about how one drought or one flood can completely wipe out their livelihood. Their physical and economic well-being depends on a stable climate, and so does ours. Warming temperatures are reducing the yields of staple crops like rice, soybean, wheat, maize. So if we don't take climate change seriously and address the stressors that we've applied to our natural environment, we are not going to have a sustainable food supply for all. The global food system must be climate smart and eco-friendly. So I think we should find ways to scale up technologies, just like many of the ones that you've seen on the exhibition floor here. I got to do that Gimme 5 thing that they have out there. And I was so impressed by learning about the solar water pump in South Sudan. It's called the Rainmaker Enterprise. It's founded and directed by James Madeir. James is here. He's right in the front row. Hi, James. If there's any investors here and you're looking, yes, James deserves applause. If you're investors and you haven't figured out yet where to invest in something that does something meaningful, please find James. Because James is combating home insecurity in his home country by providing reliable, sustainable, and scalable water infrastructure. And smallholder farmers in the developing world need access to low-cost innovations so that they can use natural resources most efficiently. So as agroecosystems shift with a changing climate, public and private investments are going to be essential to sustain productivity and increase resilience. Which leads me to that second point, if you remember, the importance of sustainable political leadership. So that means local, national, and global good governance is critical. Did you know that 11% of the world's population, which is about 815 million people, are food insecure today? 11%. Of that group, over 100 million are severely food insecure. That basically means they're on the brink of starvation. And so if there's one thing I want you to remember, a lot comes at you at these 4 days, and you have lots of other speakers, but if there's one thing you remember from me today, it's this. After a decade of consistent progress, we watched the number of hungry people in the world continue to go down. Now the trend has reversed. The number of hungry people is now on the rise. And I'll tell you exactly why. Political instability, man-made conflict, not woman-made conflict, and that's a really important point. Man-made conflict is the main driver of food insecurity in 18 countries, and it's the primary cause of the world's worst cases of hunger and famine. Unrest and food insecurity are some of the top drivers that are leading to the largest number of displaced persons we've seen in history. So until there's peace and stability, I do not believe it's possible for us to meet the Sustainable Development Goals of eradicating hunger and poverty. I do believe, though, that agriculture is one of the best solutions to reducing poverty and hunger. According to the World Bank, agriculture is up to 4 times more effective than other sectors in lifting the incomes of the extreme poor. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's 11 times more effective. So agriculture can be this powerful economic force, but it requires committed political leadership, both at the national government level and the international community, in order to tap its vast potential. So this includes dedicating a percentage of national budgets to agriculture. It includes prioritizing foreign assistance for inclusive agriculture growth and building better market infrastructure, as well as enforcing, not just creating, but enforcing sound policies that encourage private sector investments. So we know what to do. We have the right development tools to address poverty and hunger through agricultural growth. We have the right appropriate public services that are foundational to the social contract. But these interventions have little value, and they certainly are not sustainable if they aren't coupled with political will and commitments at the country level. So good governance can stimulate agricultural commerce as surely as poor governance can undermine it. So that's why when we talk about host country partnership and leadership and investment, why it's so important. The global promises made as part of the Sustainable Development Goals and other commitments will not be possible without sound leadership at the local level. When governments are dedicated to inclusive agricultural growth and enforcing those policies that foster a good enabling environment, they can create that space for the private sector to come in. And that brings me to my third critical element of sustainability: market systems. So when I talk about market systems, this is where I get nerdy. I'm referring to like a web or network involved from farm to fork. So that's the producers, the buyers, the consumers, as well as the entities that are in place to support that system, like financial institutions. So whether you're looking at a market system for like a select commodity, say coffee or chocolate, a market system's strength relies on all of those actors and how well that value chain can sustain their business as well as adopt new technologies and practices. So this is where you food innovators that are still left here on the last day come in. Entrepreneurs have the opportunity, and I would dare say the obligation, to jumpstart economic growth, to create jobs, and strengthen the global food system. Startups and investors can help address the food security of the world by creating technologies that address things like food waste, water scarcity, soil quality, traceability, and other problems that we have. Another element that I haven't heard talked about a lot this week is the need to continue to invest in agriculture research and development, which we need to create these new innovations. So advances in digital agriculture technologies through agronomy, plant and animal sciences, genomics, they all have been made because businesses know we need this to sustain our food system. Over the past decade, private sector-driven investments in research and development have significantly increased. In the United States, the private sector accounts for 75% of research and development in ag. It's been integral to us improving our agriculture productivity. But the private sector, like anything, can't do it alone. Both public and private research and development contributions and partnerships are crucial if we're going to advance sustainable global food security. The United States has historically been at the forefront of science and innovation, but I'll tell you, our leadership is slipping. China has been outspending the US 2-to-1 on public agriculture research since 2013, and this has to change. So if we're going to sustain our global food systems, we have to make some radical transformations. We need to protect our natural resources. We need political leaders to understand the linkages between a stable food security community and political stability. And we need the private sector, from scientists to disruptive innovators, to develop and incubate new ideas that strengthen the market system. And yeah, we totally have our work cut out for us. When we think about protracted conflicts and famines and climate volatility and that rising demand for food. But there are solutions. I mean, look around here. Okay, these are like the ones that are left. But look around this whole week. Think about everyone you've met, all the conversations you've had, or the talks that you've listened to. Because you know what? We are the solution. We're the ones that have the capacity to transform the system. We're the disruptors, the thinkers, and the doers. And we're the only ones, combined getting other people involved, that can create a sustainable food system for the common good. As Norman Borlaug said, food is the moral right of all who are born into this world. So I ask you, what are we going to do about it? Thank you.
Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure for me to be with you here today. I couldn't be over the past 4 days, but I have been following Seeds and Chips since Monday, and I was very impressed because this is not a normal territory for a European Union official to be involved in. We are sometimes much in the European Brussels bubble, but with what the previous speaker, Kimberly, said, I think we need to be more present in events like this. It's important to be present with young, nascent innovators, with young entrepreneurs, with future entrepreneurs. And I will discuss with you a bit today, in the few minutes I have, what we as European Commission, I come from the part of the House which deals with development cooperation. I have 12 years of experience in the European Commission, 10 years in the private sector before. I was in agriculture before, now I moved into development cooperation, and I will a bit explain what we are trying to do. And my take home would be to put you in touch with us to see how we can really do impact and have impact on the ground in the countries we are intervening. We are intervening in around 60 countries, around 40 in sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America and Central America, Asia, and the Caribbean and Pacific. We have a portfolio for the period 2014-2020 of around 9 billion, and here I'm speaking in terms of agriculture, rural development, and nutrition. And it was good that it was mentioned that research and innovation is key. In fact, post-Paris summit of last year, we are building up a portfolio which is going to be hopefully around 1 billion for the next 3 years, which will focus on types of innovation which can have impact on the ground. And we are actually in the process of seeing what delegations want in terms of research and innovation at country level, because I think what is important is what are the demand-led processes coming up also from farmers' organizations, women farmer leaders at country level. So you have issues the past months stemming from problems like the fall armyworm in many parts of Africa, to animal diseases, the peste de petit ruminant, which is impacting a lot of pastoralists and livestock, We're looking at alternative models. Is the agroecology model? I was in Rome about 4 weeks ago, where there was a major symposium on agroecology. Is the agroecology model the silver bullet? Or we need to have a blending of models, of which agroecology is one. So we're looking at alternative systems which can have an impact on productivity, but not only, on all forms, on the 3 facets of sustainability: economic, social. We need to have a dimension which puts gender mainstreaming in our portfolio, the youth dimension, but also the inclusive and equity. I think we need to give a lot of importance to the equity dimension, because we are increasingly in a world, especially in the agricultural world, where even in a European context, the price transmission mechanism doesn't move closer to the farmers, to the producers of food. So we need to look more closely into how equitable farm systems should be, and that there is a fair share which is distributed across the food chain. Second area where we are working on, and this was also mentioned a few minutes ago, is resilience. Climate change has an impact on agricultural production systems. Yes, many are man-made, but we still have 100 million who are in severe malnutrition. And we are working a lot with the Rome-based agencies, with US, FuseNet, on what is known as the global network. This is the global network following up on the food crisis report, which we are doing every year with the Rome-based agencies, to look at how we can really better link the humanitarian, development, and the peace nexus. Most of the headlines are on what we call the 4 country crises: the Somalias, the Yemens, North Nigeria, and Sudan. But these constitute around 25% of the 100 million. There are still a lot of countries, from Venezuela to Burundi to the Central African Republic, which are sometimes, unfortunately, forgotten. And this is an area where we are trying to, also in close collaboration with the US, with our member states, to see how we can really implement better the nexus between what is purely humanitarian and how to transit between a humanitarian dimension to a development dimension. But key to this is you can't have development, can't have sustainability if you don't solve what is primarily a political problem. Thirdly, private sector models. Most of you here are innovators or aiming to be future innovators. And we would like to engage with you more on type of business models which can become more inclusive at country level, at local level, which are embedded in the national development plans of, say, whether it's Zambia or Cameroon or countries as difficult or fragile like Somalia or South Sudan. So we are doing value chain analysis on cocoa, on coffee, and cotton, so amongst others. So if you are working in these areas, clearly speak to us. We are now launching what is known as the External European Investment Plan, which is a massive plan which tries to really put a private sector dimension which blends the grant element that the European Union has traditionally been very much involved with private sector investment, so that we really have impact on the ground. And we're doing this not only in agriculture, but also in energy, because you can't have vibrant rural areas without a strong renewable energy dimension, and also having linkages with cities. So the rural-urban dimension is being captured as well. The digital dimension, so connectivity, using the technologies that we have heard over the last 4 days, and also supporting micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. The reference to nutrition. Yes, we focus traditionally on stunting and on wasting, but there is a big problem, as we know, of obesity and overweight, even in the same families. So we have now, over the past 5 years, a portfolio to try to stem stunting. We have a target, which is part of the World Health Assembly target of reducing stunting by 7 million by 2025, but also a portfolio of around 3.5 billion. So again, and we will be publishing what we do on an annual basis, implementation reports with member states to track how our portfolio is having impact on the ground. So a message to you, those innovators who are working on food fortification systems, nutrition in all its forms, clearly speak to the European Commission to try to really find adapted solutions on the ground. And I could not come here without speaking about governance. This is a bit of our core business on a daily basis. We feel that, and I was in L'Aquila around 10 years ago, I feel that there is a bit of a loss of momentum of global governance in food security at the G7, G20. Yes, we mention en passant from time to time what we can do in agriculture and innovation in terms of innovative systems, but the momentum of L'Aquila, of Paris, seems to be losing traction, and this is a pity. I think it is now even more now than 10, 15 years ago, where we need to show global leadership. And we as European Union are trying to in close collaboration, I know that Mr. Ungbo from IFAD was here 2 days ago, with FAO, with IFAD and WFP, not only on the global report, but in all areas of the portfolio of these 3 Rome-based agencies, trying to give signals on the ground in close collaboration with national governments. One of the targets of African states was, about 15, 20 years ago, this is the Maputo and then Malabo Declaration, that 10% of public expenditure should be on agriculture. 20 years hence, only less than 10 countries out of the 55 are still investing 10% in public expenditure. There is a problem now even, which is being compounded by lower commodity prices, that public expenditure in agriculture is not being attractive enough, and that's why we need alternative systems of private sector models, which are really inclusive models to actually accompany a public sector which has difficulty to invest in agriculture. So some take-home messages which I think an audience like you needs to consider. First of all, we need to engage more with young entrepreneurs and platforms to actually link the political discourse at the highest level with what happens on the ground. We need to link you to also the universities and the research institutes which actually are doing cutting-edge research. We need to empower farmers' organizations, and you also have a role as entrepreneurs to insert yourself in a value chain by also integrating and helping farmers' organizations to really be more pervasive within the value chains. And last but not least, we need to have a global governance dimension which really puts agriculture, nutrition, research and innovation in agriculture, basically all the topics which we discussed over the past 4 days, in terms of high items on the agenda. Because we risk that we hear about everything, but not about how we can really feed the world in a sustainable model, but also how to tackle the 100 million plus. And as Kimberly said, these numbers are not static. They risk to increase in the years ahead if we don't tackle the root causes. And the root causes clearly need to take into account a governance model at local, regional, sub-regional, and international level, but also a model which actually empowers national governments to steer food systems in a more holistic way. So if we can manage to link ourselves to you, to the leaders, whether national, to the European Parliament, who represent you in Brussels, we really can have an impact. And now is the time, because we are entering the last phase of this commission, of the cycle of financial programming, that by 2020 we can really make what I call a leap of quality change that will really have an impact, not in 10, 15 years' time, but really in 3 to 5 years' time. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is John Rulak. I'm the founder of Nativa. We're an organic food company based in California. I'm here today to talk about regenerative agriculture. First off, I want to thank Seeds and Chips for inviting me here. It's been a great conference, great to spend time with different people from different countries and learn about what's going on here in Europe, and as well as meeting people from all over the world. So I started the company based in California with 500 food bars and sold them out of my car for the first few months. That was in 1999, and today we're in 20,000 stores around the world. We have 110 employees, and we specialize in organic hemp, chia, and coconut superfoods. We also have a 1% program where we donate 1% of our sales to groups that promote sustainable and ecological farming practices. For example, we contributed 100,000 coconut seedlings to our partner small growers in the Philippines to help them on their farms. So one of the things I'm going to be really focusing on is regeneration and regenerative agriculture. And kind of a personal story, I've been involved in studying nature and natural systems. I wrote a book called Backyard Composting in the 1990s. I attend a lot of conferences on organic farming. And I never really, up until 5 years ago, I didn't really understand that the #1 solution to climate change is healthy soils and switching agriculture from a degenerative model to a regenerative model. And the challenge we face is that industrial agriculture is so powerful politically and economically. They influence policy, and many leaders just aren't aware of the benefits of healthy soils. And so for the last 5 years, I've been working to spread that message, and including I'm producing a film called Kiss the Ground, which we showed a couple nights ago here in Milano, and got a lot of good feedback. And it tells a story about how we can change agriculture from being part of the problem to part of the solution. And it's also starting to catch on, this idea that soil or dirt can actually help save the earth. 5 years ago, this really wasn't a discussion. If you look at Google searches for healthy soil, it's just really rapidly growing. So more and more people are interested, and it also can be at a very large scale. We have farmers and ranchers in the United States that are doing it 5,000 and 10,000 acres. In Australia, there's people who are doing it hundreds of thousands of acres. And then also, it's also referred, another way to look at this movement is agroecology, which is very popular in Africa and also in Central and South America. So when we look at agriculture today and where it has come from, where it is today, and where it's going, I really like these three ways to describe agriculture. One is degenerative. And that's really the industrial food system we have today. And what's the commonality with degenerative agriculture? First off, the soil quality, organic matter is dropping. Organic matter in soils around the world are very poor. And interestingly, all of our major universities, agriculture places, don't teach really about healthy soils. Agronomists go through school and they have no idea that organic matter is so important, to function for plants. The other challenge that we've, and that's partly because of the corruption of the political and economic processes, Do you realize even that what's driving the regenerative movement in the United States has become from farmers, and universities are really kind of asleep at the wheel, and they're not even interested in this subject, ironically. You would think that they would be, but some of them are starting to kind of break through and do this. The other thing that's ironic, guess who gets the most subsidy in the world for agriculture? The foods that are most destructive for the planet and have the worst nutrition for people. That's what's subsidized. And then we take those subsidized foods and what do we do with them? We export them to other developing countries and destabilize their agricultural system. And we call that free enterprise. You know, I challenge the Bayers and Monsantos to practice capitalism, to have them go off the subsidies that they get. Basically, junk food companies in America get things produced at 60 cents on the cost of goods. Imagine if I could buy my organic foods at 30% less of the cost to produce it. And, you know, an example, we're burning fuel in tanks for corn, and then they get this free thing, and then they feed that to industrial agriculture for feeding cows, et cetera. And so now part of the way to have been addressing is sustainable. A lot of people use the word sustainable agriculture, and that's something I've been using. It's actually, like on some of our logos and things, we're getting people in our country are now switching over from sustainable to regenerative. The idea is if we've destroyed a lot of the soils and ecosystems, how good is it just to say we'll just sustain that low level of vitality? You know, if you were in a relationship and your partner says, "I'd like a sustainable relationship with you," or if they said, "I'd like a regenerative relationship that gets better and improves," I think that's obviously a little more desirable. And we can actually use through the power of soil, we can regenerate our soils and our ecosystems. But it's a way to look at this. And in Europe, the French Ministry of Agriculture in the COP21 proposed the 4 per 1,000 initiative. How many people have heard that? And so that very few people, most Europeans don't even know about it, even though Britain signed it, Germany signed it. I'm not quite sure if Italy signed it. Many of the countries of the world signed it, except for the United States, India, and China, the biggest contributors to climate change. One of the impacts of industrial agriculture is biodiversity. And how many of us really enjoy looking at beautiful things in nature? Did you know in Germany, 75% of all winged insects have disappeared in the last 30 years? The number one cause is industrial agriculture, these biocides, these pesticides. It's a war on nature. And if the insects go, then the birds go next. And also the oceans are absorbing much of this carbon. That carbon that's up in the atmosphere, it goes into the oceans, and the oceans are becoming acidic. And through regenerative agriculture, we have the ability to pull that carbon and put it back into the soil. Did you know that the soil holds 3 times as much carbon as that's in the atmosphere? But at COP21, soils were not even on the agenda, not even to be discussed. And they're the biggest carbon sink. Here's some of the examples of regenerative agriculture, some of the principles. And in each region, each country can have different applications. It's not a cookie-cutter approach. And cows can actually be part of the solution. Right now, they're the number one problem, industrial agriculture, but they can be part of the solution through mob grazing. You can learn more about that. I won't get into all the details. A way to think about degenerative agriculture, industrial agriculture today, they run on yesterday's sunlight, on petrochemicals. Regenerative agriculture runs off today's sunlight, runs off of carbon. What drives regenerative agriculture is carbon in the soil, in the system. And so we can take what we think is actually evil. You know, we've been told by the modern environmental movement and by Al Gore and things that carbon is bad, but carbon's actually a resource for us. And it can make local water in the small water cycle. Rain for climate is something you should definitely look into, and how we can increase water. Just a little overview on how plants take in CO2, create oxygen, and sequester that carbon into the soil and the roots. This is one of the greatest environmental thinkers and designers in the world, Buckminster Fuller, an American. His quote, "Technology evolved by man is amateurish compared to the elegance of non-humanly contrived regeneration. And this is our challenge. We worship at the altar of the techno-utopia solution, when really the solutions for climate change and human health is based in natural systems, because we've been disconnected from the natural world and we need to get connected back. And when you look at this right here, do you see an ocean, or do you see agricultural lands? Or is there a wall in between the two of them, or is it all connected? It's all connected, and we need to learn to do that. This is a great resource called Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming, edited by Paul Hawkins, a friend of mine. And it has 100 of the top solutions. 15 of the top 25 are land-based, and they have a European division there, Drawdown Europe. So I encourage you to look at that. And just to close, I would just say it's up to us, each individually, us and our regions and our organizations, to learn to take that carbon and put it into the soil through our agricultural policies and the foods we choose to eat every day. And then we can create a more regenerative world, a world that we can live in. If we don't, our climate systems are going to be broken, and we're going to have a hard time to live on this planet. That's really the issue. What do we do with that legacy carbon? Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Marco Limonte. I'm the country manager for Tesla, Italy. And today I'll talk to you a little bit about why we chose to participate in the Seeds and Chips, and a little bit of what's behind the company, what we're really here for. So, okay, there we are. So our mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. I'm sure most of you identify us as a car company, and maybe as a upper luxurious car company. But I hope that at the end of this presentation you'll have a bit of a different angle. And especially I hope that you have a little bit more insight into why we're doing what we're doing. So over the past few years, as you know, there's been, we certainly heard of this many times during the conference, there's been a huge spike in CO2 levels. Now CO2 is kind of connected to the planet, right? I mean, it's a spike of CO2, greenhouse emissions, global warming. That is all maybe subject of debate. I'm sure everyone in here agrees that there is a direct connection between CO2 and climate change, but there's something a little bit more pervasive that is happening, and that is connected to the fact that CO2 is impacting our planet, but what really is happening is the air pollutants in our cities are impacting us. So I just want to take a pause right here, right now, and ask you, how many of you care about what they're eating and pay attention to what they eat, right? Either eating, okay, most of us here, good. So that is a choice you make, right? So you choose what you eat every day, and I guess most of you out here, you're sensitive to these topics. You'll be choosing more sustainable foods, more bio foods. But air is not a choice. You breathe whatever air is around you at any given time. You can choose to live on a mountain or on the seaside and hope for better air quality. But that would create a significant compromises in your life. Most of the European population lives concentrated around and in large cities. And what happens in cities, aside from the whole global CO2 greenhouse effect, rise of our average temperatures, but what happens in the city is this huge concentration of pollutants. And what we're seeing is over 500,000 deaths in Europe, premature deaths, due to air pollutants, NOx, PM10, PM2, PM5. These are all names that we're starting to hear more and more now. And so it's really so clear, like the whole, let's say, rise in temperature and gas effects, global warming, as we said, is maybe a matter of debate, but this is not. Pollution in our air, in our cities, is directly correlated with a correlation of 1, which is a perfect correlation, to respiratory admissions to hospitals. This could not be more clear and could not be more directly impacted to one of the, if we boil it down, a human being only needs air, food, and water. And while I agree with you that food and water you can do something about, and you can make your choices, air is something that you can't really choose. Again, particulate matter, PM, the famous PM10s, PM2.5s, there's a direct correlation with respiratory issues and a direct correlation with lung cancer. So again, this is our mission, accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. How are we to do this? I'll go very quickly. This is not about our products. It's about what's behind it. So we believe that as Tesla, we can bring a solution to both generation, so generate energy in a sustainable way, store it, and transport. So yes, transport is kind of the last thing I mentioned. It's where we started. Now, why did we start from transport? Well, it was, let's say, the secret plan, the Tesla master plan, which was announced by Elon, of course, as soon as the company was founded, was that to accelerate transition to sustainable transport. And how do you do that? Electric cars. Electric cars are free of any kind of emission. And how do you start a company from scratch into the auto business, which is one of the most difficult businesses to start up in? Just think that we're traded on the NASDAQ stock exchange. Before us, the last car company to go public was Ford. There's been no other car company between Ford and Tesla to go public in the US. So how do you do it? This is our plan. We start out small with very expensive cars, let's say high cost, so low volume, high cost, the Roadster, and we introduced that in 2008. Use that money to build a car that is half as expensive but twice as popular, twice the volume. So we went to mid-volume with Model S and Model X, which are a sedan and or SUV, one of which is parked just out here. Use that money to go into the real end game, which is the high-volume, low-cost electric car. So how have we done on that plan? This is just a quick recap. We were born in 2003, so we still consider ourselves very much a young company. I mean, for a car company to be this young and have done this much, it's amazing. And 2003 is when we were open. Just 5 years later, we started that master plan. We put into execution the first step, which was the Roadster. Then we produced other cars, and you'll notice that the cars are on the bottom, so we've pretty much kept on pace. But there's other stuff on the top. So how does that fit into the plan? Just last year, Elon presented part 2. So because part 1 of the master plan was was making electric cars accessible to the mass public. What's next? This is what's next. So beautiful solar and storage. So we are currently producing solar panels, solar roofs in the US, storage systems, both residential and industrial scale. We're going to expand into major vehicle segments. I'm sure some of you have seen the presentation of the Tesla semi-truck. So we're going to soon have a truck, pure electric again. We will go into then self-driving. And self-driving is kind of the last thing I want to leave you with, kind of as a teaser. Self-driving is the whole idea of autonomous driving. Now, it's not just a gimmick. What happens when your car essentially can drive itself? It's not just the luxury of being able to read a book while you're traveling. That, of course, is very nice. But what happens, and this is the most relevant slide on this, what happens is that full self-driving capability essentially allows for the car to take care of itself in many different situations. For example, charging itself when you're not using it, going to park itself when you're not using it. It is perceived as, let's say, also a controversial feature, but what it will allow, and today all of our cars already include all the sensor suites and all the cameras and all the basics that are needed to then upgrade to full and complete autonomy. And what this will allow for is essentially a complete redesign of our cities. We will no longer need to see half of our streets filled up with parking places and cars. We will no longer have the problem of charging, because most people, when they're thinking about buying an electric car, the first thing they say is, well, where am I going to charge it? If the car can drive itself, it can charge itself. Just at night, goes off to the charging station, plugs itself in, and then comes up and picks you up. But even more interesting is the whole new economies that open up. Because when you're not using your car, all sorts of things can happen. The car can start making money for you. The car can start, being a service to other people. Ultimately, and this is the final question I'll ask you, once full autonomous driving technology is here, would you feel the need to own a car? Which is coming from a company that today is selling cars. It's a pretty big question. So this is just a super quick presentation of why we're here. I do welcome everyone to have the experience hands-on to our cars. That's what's really cool about us being here. You can just try hands-on for yourself what it means to drive full electric. You'll be blown away, I promise. With zero pollution and zero, of course, PM. So thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good afternoon. My name is Giulio. I am responsible for TechPack here in Italy. I think most of you have enjoyed water in a carton package. Is food packaging evil? I think this is a key question. Would it be better a world where we can buy food directly from the source, like the two cats here in the picture? Unfortunately, it's not possible to have a world without a package. Let me start with a little bit of the why I'm here. I joined TechPack almost 20 years ago, and I have devoted all this time to one simple mission. There is a twofold mission: making food safe and available everywhere. And this is basically the vision of TechPack. Why is important? I think we heard before from Kimberly, 11% of the world population are in starving condition. And there is even another, maybe not known a lot, data that is important to share. 10% of the world population is basically getting sick for food poisoning every year, which means there is a serious problem, food safety. There is as well another data: 400,000 people every year die for food poisoning. So committing to making food safe and available everywhere, it means in a certain way trying to address the availability of food and the availability in a safe manner. When we think about innovation and when we speak about innovation, we always have to think consumers. A package is the first interface that each of us has in front of a supermarket shelf. And there are 4 key attributes that are important. Of course, there is convenience, there is attractiveness, there is protection, and there is environment. So let me take a deep dive into the 4 categories. I've seen several startups here. If you want to drive innovation into the packaging business, you need to think to these 4 attributes. So when it comes to convenience, today is more of an hygienic factor. We give it for granted. A package should work, it should be easy to open, it should be easy to pour, it should be easy to grab, and etc., etc., etc. There will not be a second purchasing if the package doesn't work. So you lose your consumer. Attractiveness is where I think we have a blue ocean today, where all the startups, we have plenty of technologies that are getting into this interface. And this is what primarily every brand is looking for. They want to stand up when they are in the shelf. They want to differentiate. So you need to come up as something unique. And of course, this is an area where the technology is capable to enhance the interface and to create an experience. Food protection. Food protection is overlooked in certain categories, and it is completely underestimated in other categories. And I think when it comes to protection, there are two simple barriers that a package has to create: oxygen barrier and light barrier. And of course, some of you are thinking light. Light is important. Light is one of the key reasons why vitamins and several nutrients get destroyed. And I give you a clear, concrete example: extra virgin olive oil. This is a study that we did with the University of Perugia, where we have been testing a bottle against a carton package, or a bottle against a completely dark package. And what came up, the degradation of the polyphenol, which is the most important nutrients in olive oil. This is the profile you see of the degradation. And this is simply under the light of a normal supermarket. So can you imagine what the sunlight is creating when you have transparency? But of course, here is where consumer plays a role, because we all want to see transparency. We want to see inside the package how the product it is, without thinking how light is impacting the quality of the food. And then the last attribute, environment. This is where really the industry has to make the difference. And is where I think most of the innovation will come in the next 10 to 15 years. There are two battles that we need to fight. The first one is pollution, of course. We see what's going on today. It's in some way becoming part of our consciousness, what we are creating with the waste. The second thing, and I think we have been talking a lot around, is the global warming, is the connection with CO2 emission. And I tell you one thing that changed completely my way of thinking around global warming. What I learned is that for every 1 degree that the average temperature of the Earth is raising, you have 7% more evaporation. And of course, being water, a water cycle, what happens when you have higher evaporation? You accelerate this water cycle. And it's basically the phenomena that we are living every single day. We have long period of dryness, and we have flood. This is what's going on with CO2. And this is why I think as well here, with Kyoto Protocol, with the Paris Agreement, we are building the awareness that we are doing something wrong and that we should change the way we consume. Let me take you through what is the future and how I see the future of the food packaging. It has to mirror Mother Nature. The more we come close to nature, the better package solution we'll have in our hand. And here it is about like a banana skin or an apple skin, no more, no less. What kind of property do we have in a package like this? First of all, it is renewable, which means it grows back and we are not depleting any earth resources. Second, it is compostable or it can be recyclable. It comes back once again. Third, it has to have low CO2 emission. And this is how the future of the package we see looking forward. We have some example. A couple of years ago, we introduced a package that is fully renewable. So we have, you know that the carton package is a combination of material. It's primarily carton, 75%, and the rest is plastic. In this case, through sugar cane, we have produced a plastic that goes into this package, and this package is completely renewable. Of course, this is not the final solution. It's just a step forward to securing that packaging goes fully renewable. Second example that I have for you is the recyclability. I think here, when it comes to paper, we all know it's recyclable. But when it comes to multi-material, very few people knows that it is recyclable. And is a simple recyclability approach where you put this package into a pulper, which is basically extracting the fiber of the paper and releasing the plastic that gets agglomerated, pelletized, and produce new plastic stuff. The third innovation element that I want to bring you is a partnership that we are building with Legambiente. And this is to try to disrupt consumer habits. We want to place a mark in each package where we say what is the CO2 impact of that specific package. And we want to introduce this because we want to have the whole packaging industry following us. We need to give the chance to the consumer to make a conscious choice. And this is why I believe the future is also in communicating to consumer what is the impact of a specific choice. We are a company that has been built with this message: a package should save more than its cost. And here it was the time the milk was distributed in glass bottle, door to door. And of course, introducing a carton package that could be distributed ambient temperature, it was a big disruption. And of course, it was generating to the one adopting it more saving than its cost. But I think the future, it has to go through this. We need to continue to create value with packaging, but at the same time, we have to not put cost on the environment. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Roberto Limentani, and I work for CAMST. It's a company which is dealing with food service. We are cooking meals for hospital and schools and companies and corporations. But the main point of this company is that it's not a company. It's a cooperative. So as you can see, we have 12,000 employees, 15,000 in Europe, 12,000 in Italy, and half of them are also shareholders. If I think about sustainability, this is the first point. For us, profit is just a tool. It's not the objective. Therefore, it gives us the opportunity to think about our responsibility. And the slide I will show now will tell you what we are doing in terms to fulfill this responsibility. So we manage more than 2,000 restaurants, canteen, and so on. And what we do in these restaurants are 116 million meals every year. And this helped us to develop our awareness in terms of wasting, in terms of redistribution, in terms of using all the law that can give us the opportunity to be part of this circular economy. So just one slide to tell you what is happening in the cycle. So the food chain starts from the production of the raw materials, and we are losing part of the food there. After that, we have to prepare all this food. And as you can guess, if you have one potato, you still have to cut part of it, and you produce some waste. And then you have to produce the meal. And, 160 million meals, it means that you have to prepare probably 1 or 2 million more to be sure that you have all the food that you need. So there is too much product at the end of the day. And then there is the final consumer. So in the plate, in the dish, there is always some food which is a leftover. So as you can see, every single part of the food chain is producing waste, which is dramatic if you think, because if you put all these things together, the food that we are actually eating is just one part of the full availability. So what we are doing, 3 projects, distribution center, production mill, and then the leftover. In the distribution center, this year we have covered more than 33 tons of food. And this was delivered and distributed and as a gift given to the charity associations. Zero waste. We have worked not only, and this will be the final message that I will give you today, not only to recover the food, but above all to create the awareness of what is the food waste and in which way we can avoid it. So with Last Minute Market, which is a no-profit, we managed to talk not only to the company or to the institution, but also to the final consumer. We have more than half of our business, which is to pupils, students from 4 years old to 15 years old. And therefore, we feel the responsibility to educate, not only to give food. And this is part of the job. And then this is the biggest part. With all the leftover, with all the food that we cannot consume, with all the product that we have in the warehouse, we are able to work with the food bank. And Banco Alimentare is the biggest Italian food bank, and they are able to distribute to more than 8,000 charity restaurants. And so the food that we prepare at lunch can be delivered at 2 o'clock after lunch and be eaten at 6 or 7 in one of these charity restaurants. So it's really circular. It's really circular. And this year we have more than 82 tons of food which has been shared. And we are working in Italy, and this is our route, but now we are present in many different countries. Just a quick example of what we are doing in Spain, which is a project that we have done in our hospitals in Spain, with the opportunity to reduce the waste through all the chain again. So, opportunity to give this food to people who need it and who can eat it. And the more interesting part of the full project, which is logistic, which is operations on, but the most interesting part is that this sustainability and the circular economy gave us the opportunity to talk to the people and to create awareness. So only if you manage to involve all the stakeholders, logistic, distribution, institution, the families of the children, then we can make the change. We heard at the beginning of this afternoon our teen innovator who was saying that we need to change and to make a difference today. This is part of it. If we manage, each of us, each of the stakeholders, each of our clients, each of the family of the pupils we feed, to be aware of the food waste and in which way we can fight it, then we will have made a little part of the change. So a little gimmick that was part of this is that we provide all the pupils of all our school with a little bag. So as you can see, it's like a portfolio, a little portfolio, which has some thermic insulation. And with this, they will go home with the fruit that they didn't eat at school. And the name of the whole project is Io non spreco, that in English is I don't waste. And I don't know if it's more important that they can eat the apple in the evening or that they can talk about this to their parents and create the awareness that will make the difference. Thank you very much.
I tell my son to hold his breath when we drive past row after row of banana plants in Central America. The chemical pesticides that hang in the air smell like death. And I get that same sinking feeling like when we drive by acre after acre of burned hillsides, slashed and burned to grow a few subsistence crops. In other places, the topsoil's already been lost, the land reduced to a moonscape of baked clay. But we keep driving to visit the farms that are a green patchwork of trees, rice paddies, and garden beds, alive with hummingbirds, butterflies, and human beings. When my son and I are greeted by giggling children who spill out of the small, palm-roofed, dirt-floored homes to greet us, I'm struck by how much we face losing to threats such as climate change. But I'm also struck by what a wonderful solution is right under our feet. The soil that grows our food is key to regenerating the planet and a climate suitable for human life. Whether we're talking about the threats or the solutions, farmers are our future. But how do we shift our eating habits away from unhealthy food grown on conventional farms that degenerate the environment to food that regenerates healthy bodies, healthy ecosystems, and a healthy climate? That's the question I was asking when I graduated from college many years ago, and my friends were thinking about how they'd find jobs that would just pay the rent. Serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in Panama showed me how subsistence farmers could lead the world to a regenerative food system. Living in rural Panama, I saw slash and burn farming firsthand. Farmers cut down some forest and burn it so the ash helps grow a few subsistence crops. But burning also harms the soil, and most of the nutrients that were in the forest go up in smoke, contributing to global warming. In a few months, the ash and topsoil wash away. So the farmer moves on to burn more forest. After repeating this cycle a number of times, the topsoil's completely lost, along with its capacity to hold water and the carbon plants need to grow. Over time, this degenerates the Earth's ability to support human life. The farmers in Panama wanted a better way of farming, but had not had the opportunity to learn one. They couldn't transform the way they'd farmed for generations with only a few months of technical assistance, especially from a gringa who had just learned Spanish well enough to stop saying 3 fleas when I meant 3 inches. They needed long-term support from a local expert if they were going to grow an abundance of food in ways that regenerate our planet. After Peace Corps, I worked for a couple other organizations, and then, with the help of one very timely donation from a man in Switzerland, I founded Sustainable Harvest International in 1997. Within a few years, we had a half dozen Central American experts teaching farmers what I considered sustainable farming practices. I encouraged an organic, ecological approach, but sometimes the field trainers told me chemical fertilizers were the only thing that would work on such poor soils. Since I didn't feel confident enough in my farming know-how, I went along with this, figuring it was better than burning more forest, right? Well, maybe not. Over the years, my colleagues and I have gained more knowledge and become certain that chemical fertilizers degenerate the environment just as much as burning. We've also seen how organic practices can outperform conventional farming. So by 2007, Sustainable Harvest International was promoting 100% organic practices. It was a year later, in 2008, that Demetrio Martinez, a farmer in Membrillo, Panama, joined our program. Growing up, he'd seen his family burn more forest every year to grow their crops, but still not have enough money to even send Demetrio to school beyond the 6th grade. When Demetrio became a father himself, he wanted more for his own children. And he went to work on a conventional rice plantation, where his coworkers got sick and died from exposure to agrochemicals. It hardly seemed worth the $6 a day he earned, but Demetrio didn't see a better option. That was until our field trainer, Diomedes, offered to visit his family every week to share knowledge that would allow Demetrio to grow an abundance of crops without burning and without chemicals. After 5 years, Demetrio's farm went from this to this. And he felt confident he could continue on his own and share what he'd learned with other farmers. By then, he was comfortable using compost, cover crops, and mulch to regenerate healthy, productive soils. And he could see the improvement from year to year in the soils and then in the crops. He knew how to create an agro-ecosystem of fruit, hardwood, nut, and spice trees growing together with coffee and sugar cane around rice paddies that are weeded and fertilized by fish. More fruits and vegetables grow on a terraced hillside. His farm's ecosystem now takes care of itself with goats, bees, soil microbes, and all sorts of creatures that have come back to the land, each playing their part. So now Demetrio's family produces enough for a healthy diet and income that meets their other needs. And since he can grow on the same land every year, Demetrio doesn't burn any more forest. In fact, Demetrio's farm produces income to meet his family's other basic needs. Whoops. Oh, sorry. And his farm is impacting most, if not all, of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, that might not mean a lot if it's just the 4 acres that Demetrio farms, but he's one of 3,000 smallholder farmers who've transformed 25,000 acres of degraded land to regenerative organic farms, planting 4 million trees over the last 20 years. But that's still not nearly enough. As John said, if we stop all our emissions tomorrow, we are still going to be heating the climate and heading towards the brink of a planet that will not support human life. We'll continue down the path towards extinction. But there's still something that can save us, and it's the soil on farms like Demetrio's. All we have to do is switch from the current food system that produces most of the world's greenhouse gases, and increase the amount of carbon in the soil by 4 parts per thousand to 0 or 0.4%. And we can totally do that. There are 500 million small-scale farms that produce most of the world's food with almost no resources. If we help them become regenerative, like Dimitrio's farm, they'll draw down at least 6 billion tons of carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil every year, which is equivalent to shutting down every coal-fired power plant on Earth every year. Those 500 million farmers are ready to do their part. But you don't have to take my word for it. Here's a short video featuring 2 farmers in the Sustainable Harvest program.
Me siento totalmente realizado. Lograr algo en la vida es algo que uno lo llena de orgullo. Fíjese, cuando usted se pone una meta y cuando usted siembra una plantita, usted la siembra con cariño y sabe de que esa plantita le va a producir alimento. Cuando inicié, yo era un campesino jornalero. Yo me dedicaba a ganar mis 120 lempiras diarias, 100 lempiras en aquel tiempo, hace 4 años.
Si queríamos comer una fruta, teníamos que comprarla.
Sustainable Harvest International's 5-phase program empowers families, individuals, and communities to preserve our planet's tropical forests while overcoming poverty. Through SHI's programs, farming families are trained in how to produce food sustainably and organically, rather than relying on traditional but harmful slash and burn methods. Tropical forests provide us with oxygen, stabilize the climate, and are home to over half of the species of life on the planet. Yet they are being destroyed at alarming rates.
A veces se aplica mucho químico en la tierra, meten fuego a los rastrojos para sembrar maíz, frijoles, y todo eso nos daña a todos. Antes de que Fucoso llegara a la comunidad y que yo fuera parte de esa familia, yo hacía igual que sin ninguna conciencia, sin ninguna mentalidad. Pero ya cuando vino Fucoso, ya la institución nos enseñó a trabajar de diferente forma. Ya todo a base de abonos orgánicos.
Mi nombre es Doris Esmeralda Sandoval. Vivo en la comunidad de Piedra Gorda.
The families of Piedra Gorda are in the beginning phases of SHI's program and are just learning to work their land with organic practices. Their local field trainer will teach them how to make compost, diversify their crops, and save seeds from one year to the next. They will then go on to teach the farmers how to identify markets and strengthen their entrepreneurial skills. After approximately 5 years, the farmers will graduate with the ability to support their families and become community leaders.
Antes el costumbre era de quemar la tierra, pues se cosechaba muy poco, ¿va? Entonces allá a mitad de año teníamos que comprarla, ¿va?
Hacemos el mayor esfuerzo de transmitir a las familias conocimientos sobre los principales nutrientes que contienen algunos alimentos, para que ellos mejoren su alimentación.
Queremos cambiar, ya queremos cosechar más.
Y si yo no cuido el entorno donde vivimos, ¿dónde van a vivir mis hijos? ¿Dónde? ¿Cuál irá a ser el destino de ellos?
What? Oh. Thank you. So what will be the future of the world's children? All of us on this planet will decide whether it will be a degenerated future or a regenerated future. Those 500 million farmers are ready to do their part, but they can only do it if we do our part. So here's a couple easy ways that you can join them. That's the farmers market here in Milan. So first, please get as much food as you can from regenerative, organic farms, and when possible, ones in your own community. Elliot Coleman, my favorite farmer back in Maine, where I live, points out that we happily pay more for better cars, better shoes, better televisions. So why, when it comes to the food that can either degenerate or regenerate our bodies and our planet, will we not pay a little bit more for something so much better? Second, please consider supporting programs that help farmers like Demetrio transition to regenerative farming. It's time for all of us to come together and build the fertile ground for an abundant future. When I see my son's face light up as he pulls a bright orange carrot out of the rich, dark earth, I know his children will not have such a joyful life unless humanity digs in and gives it all we've got in the next 10 years. If we want a healthy, happy future for our children, then we will support regenerative, agroecological farms, because farmers are our future. Thank you.